Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a totally fascinating piece of history and theology. We're going to see exactly how just 4 short sentences, revealed way back in the 7th century, completely tackled the ancient world's most massive theological questions. Let's decode a foundational Islamic text known as Surah al-Ikhlas, or the Purity. Here's our roadmap for this Explainer. We'll start with the universal question, hit the definitive answer, decode the divine attributes, see how it dismantles divine lineage, look at the 3 pillars of monotheism, and wrap up with the spiritual rewards. Section 1. The Universal Question. Okay, let's set the scene. We're stepping back to the 7th century Arabian Peninsula. According to classical commentary and historical traditions, people repeatedly approached the Prophet Muhammad with one very specific question. Tell us of the ancestry of your Lord. You gotta remember, in the ancient world, gods had families, right? They had fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. So when a brand new message of monotheism hit the scene, the completely logical first question for people of that era was, well, where does this god come from? What's his lineage? And get this wasn't just some fringe question asked by an isolated group. It was literally coming from all sides. You had the polytheists of Makkah, who worshipped idols made of wood and stone, the Jewish communities in Khaybar, the Christian delegations from Najran, and even various nomadic Bedouin tribes. Every single one of these groups had their own preconceived notions of a physical, genealogical deity. They wanted to know what this new god was actually made of. Was it gold, silver, iron? And, of course, who he inherited the world from. Which brings us to Section 2, the definitive answer. In response to all these diverse, probing questions, the Quranic text delivered a definitive, unchanging answer for its followers in the form of Chapter 112, Surah al-Ikhlas. It kicks off with the foundational invocation used across the Quran, in the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. This immediately sets the stage, letting listeners know this is a message of pure monotheism anchored in ultimate compassion and mercy. Then we get the very first verse, directly addressing the audience. Say, He is Allah, the one and only. Now, the word Allah wasn't actually unfamiliar to the Arabs. They recognized it as the supreme creator. But this verse, it immediately redefines his nature, stripping away the 360 idols they associated with him and establishing him as entirely singular. The second verse drops a massive paradigm shift. Allah is independent of all, and all are dependent on him. This establishes absolute self-sufficiency. Think about it. This was a complete departure from the ancient gods of mythology who literally needed food, drink, rest, or human offerings just to sustain their power. Instead, this verse declares a creator who sustains absolutely everything, but requires absolutely nothing in return. Then comes the third verse. Neither has he an offspring, nor is he the offspring of anyone. Boom. That directly, unequivocally answers that ancestry question everyone was asking. It completely severs the concept of a supreme being from human biology, reproduction, and lineage. No father, no mother, no son, and no daughter. Finally, the fourth verse wraps it up, and none is equal with him in rank. This establishes absolute incomparability. It leaves 0 room for equals, 0 room for associates, and totally rejects the idea that there's some sort of species of gods. Moving into Section 3, Decoding the Divine Attributes. So the real crucial point here isn't just the English translation, it's the profound linguistic weight of the original Arabic words. Let's compare 2 terms for one. In the first verse, the word used is ahad, not the much more common word wahid. Why does that matter? Well, wahid simply means one, but it can be used to describe a compound group, like one nation, one team, or one universe, things made of many parts. Ahad, on the other hand, implies a unique, indivisible oneness with absolutely no tinge of plurality. It cannot be divided or broken down into parts. In Arabic, this specific word is used exclusively for Allah, to show that his oneness is absolute. Then we have the word used in the second verse, as-samad. This term is incredibly vast. According to classical lexicographers, it roughly translates to the perfect, immortal fulfiller of needs who lacks nothing. It describes a chieftain whose leadership is absolute, who has 0 physical vulnerabilities, meaning he doesn't eat, sleep, or die, and to whom the entire universe turns for survival while he remains completely independent of them. Next up, Section 4, Dismantling Divine Lineage. The text doesn't just state what God is, it systematically dismantles what God is not. By asserting the creator is Ahad and As-Samad, the verses directly refuted widely held historical beliefs. No more gods made of physical elements like wood, stone, gold, or silver. No more deities requiring food, drink, or human offerings to survive. It entirely threw out the concept of gods having wives or adopting sons and begetting daughters, which, by the way, was super common in paganism and altered earlier scriptures. Ultimately, the text argues that a true supreme being cannot be mortal or have a beginning and an end. If a being relies on reproduction, it implies mortality, right? And this surah just completely severs that link. Section 5. 3 Pillars of Monotheism. Islamic theology categorizes this pure monotheism, known as Tawheed, into 3 distinct pillars. And what's honestly amazing is that all 3 are elegantly contained within this single tiny chapter. First is Uluhiyya, found in the declaration, He is Allah, meaning He alone is the true deity worthy of worship. Second is Rububiyyah, seen in the concept of As-Samad, denoting His absolute lordship and the fact that all of creation depends entirely on Him. And third is Asma wa Sifat, referring to His perfect, unique names and attributes, like being indivisibly one and having no equal. It is literally a masterclass in theological structure, packed into just a few words. And finally, Section 6, Virtues and Spiritual Rewards. Now that we've got the deep theology and historical context down, let's explore the immense spiritual value the sources assign to these 4 short verses. For believers, this isn't just an academic text, it's a living source of spiritual power. There's a very famous quote from the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad stating, "This surah is equivalent to 1/3 of the Quran." Now, how can 4 sentences equal 1/3 of a massive book? Well, scholars explain that the Quran's core messages are essentially divided into 3 main themes: monotheism, prophethood, and the hereafter. Because Surah Al-Ikhlas is the absolute pure distillation of monotheism, reciting and understanding it is considered to be grasping 1/3 of the entire faith's foundational message. The sources also list some really incredible virtues for those who consistently recite it. It is said to earn the absolute love of Allah. It's also believed to grant the reciter popularity and acceptance among people on earth. In fact, the traditions say that when God loves someone, He actually commands the angels to love them, and that acceptance is then placed on earth. Furthermore, it's described as a guaranteed means of entering paradise and a way to naturally align a believer's physical actions with divine pleasure. There's this beautiful anecdote from the historical sources that perfectly illustrates this. It tells of a man who was appointed as a commander of a military expedition. During the journey, he led the prayers, and in every single prayer, he would recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. His companions noticed this and eventually asked him why he just kept repeating it. He simply replied, "Because it is the description of the merciful and I love to recite it." When this was reported back to the Prophet, his response was, "Inform him that Allah holds him in great love." It just goes to show how deeply connecting with the meaning of these attributes directly translates to spiritual reward. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. How can just 4 short sentences completely redefine the human understanding of a supreme being? A text so profoundly brief managed to answer the greatest, most complex theological questions of ancient humanity. It dismantled decades of mythology and established a rigorous, unshakable framework for monotheism, all while remaining perfectly simple and memorable. Whether you view it as divine revelation or historical literature, you have to ask, how many other texts in human history have done so much with so few words? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking those big questions.